Welcome to News Now Alberta. This is Special Ed. Today we're looking at your laws and rights in Canada. Now, if you're like me, you watch a lot of videos about auditors and stuff, and you know a lot about the US laws, but Canada laws are different in some places. And we're going to look at a page today that explains a lot of the laws in Canada. And this page is from a lawyer in Toronto, and he represents the Greater Toronto Area. It's called Cruz Law. It's Cruz Law Firm in in Toronto. And if you're in the Ontario Toronto area and you need a lawyer, he seems to know his stuff. So let's watch a few videos of his and watch a few other things that are more for Alberta. And let's get that started.
Thank you so much for joining me today. I've got a great, interesting topic for you today. A lot of clients ask me this. Can you tell the police to get off your property in Canada? Very loaded question. I'm going to give you a few examples and answer that question. The bottom line is yes, in most circumstances you can. There are exceptions to that, first of all, and I'll go through the exceptions. But you are in peaceable possession of your property. So if anyone shows up your property and you don't want them to be there, you can tell them to leave. There's no question about that. Now, there are exceptions. I'm going to go through the exceptions. If the police show up, for example, for routine question, they want to ask you about a crime or you're a witness or you're a suspect, and they don't have a search warrant, you can ask them to leave. If they have a search warrant, that is a warrant to arrest you or to search your home, you can't ask them to leave, unfortunately. You have to let them in, ask them to show the search warrant, be polite, say nothing. Right to remain silent is very important in that situation. What other situations? Well, if there was what are called exigent circumstances. So let's say the police got a call that you're beating up your wife, and they show up and they hear noises inside consistent with that. Well, those are exigent circumstances, and you can't ask them to leave. They're going to investigate and possibly even break in the door if they hear your wife in imminent danger, for example. Another example is what's called hot pursuit. So let's say the police are pursuing a suspect, whether it's you, car chase, for example, and you hot tail it onto your property and then into your house. Well, that's hot pursuit. They're entitled to enter your home to nab you, frankly, in that situation, or onto your driveway. That's called hot pursuit. So exigent circumstances are emergencies, hot pursuits for a suspect or you who's entered your property, and of course search warrants for either your arrest or to search your home. Can't tell them to leave. Now, what happens if you say to the police, well, look, do you have a search warrant? You're here for arrest, and you ask them to leave. And they say, no, we're here. And they insist on staying. Well, if it's an unscrupulous police officer, that could happen. You have to be very careful in that situation. Be polite, exercise your rights, don't say anything, keep asking them to leave. And you don't want to escalate the situation. You don't want to get involved in a brouhaha with them. Just be very polite. They will eventually leave. Just shut up. But that's an unethical police officer. They shouldn't be doing that. But not a heck of a lot you can do about that. You could file a police complaint after complain or possibly sue the police. But the short answer to the question, yes, in most situations, subject to those exceptions, you can ask anyone to leave your property, including the police. But heck, if they don't leave their property, don't start putting your hands on them. You know the police, they're gonna, if you start doing that, don't stand at your rights. You're the one who's going to wind up getting charged, and the courts are going to sort it out. The police may lie in that situation. You're dealing with an unscrupulous and unethical police officer then. Obviously, most police officers are honest. They're going to leave. They're just doing their job. They want to ask you a question. Maybe you're a suspect. Maybe you're a witness. And that's up to you whether you want to talk to the police. You don't have to if you don't want to, and you have a right to remain silent if you're a person who's under arrest or under investigation. It's an interesting topic. Just be careful, ask them to leave, and don't escalate the situation.
This guy's being very, respectful and friendly. He's a lawyer. Uh, but just tell him to get the hell off your property. And just keep saying that over and over again. Now, don't, put your hands on them, like he said, right? Because they'll find a reason for you to be aggravating. But just tell them to leave. You shut the hell up about anything else. You don't say another word. Just tell them to leave. This lawyer is being very friendly, like I said, but what's important is if you want these things to stop, make a complaint, bring in a lawsuit, anything like that, because they don't understand anything else.
What are your Canadian Miranda rights and your right to remain silent? Well, first of all, I think we've all been watching too much U.S. Detective shows and police shows because Miranda rights are actually a U.S. right. In the U.S., basically, it's this. Miranda is an old Supreme Court of the United States case that said, look, you have a right to attorney and you have a right to remain silent. So that's a very important right. And you've heard it on many TV shows in the past. And you've seen also the lawyer or the attorney show up at the police station. It's a little bit different in Canada. So first of all, we do have a right to counsel under Section 10B of the Charter of Canadian Rights and Freedoms. Now that's a very important right. You have a right to retain and consult with a lawyer immediately upon arrest or detention. But that lawyer is not allowed to attend the room, the interrogation room with you like they do in the States. You're allowed to do a phone call. So that lawyer is going to tell you to shut up, give you some legal advice. Then they could bring you into an interrogation room. And in that room, you should also shut up and not answer any questions. But after you've consulted with that lawyer, the police can continue the interrogation. Unlike the States, where if you've asked for a lawyer to be present, they can't continue an interrogation until they show up. And that lawyer should tell them to be quiet as well, unlike what you see on many TV shows. So the second important right is similar to the States. It's a right to remain silent. That's what your lawyers can advise you. You should never talk to the police after arrest or detention at all. You can be polite, say your name, rank, and serial number. Don't engage in any conversation with all. So that right is under Section 7 of the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. It's a very long-standing right under common law case law for many years. So there's some fundamental differences between the States and Canada. The main one is, you see, my clients ask this all the time, can you come down to the police station with me during the interrogation? No, we're not allowed to. It's not the United States. We've been all watching too many detective shows, police shows, as I started out in this matter. So there you have it. There's a simplified version of the differences. It's similar, but it's different. And a lot of clients get confused about this. But here's the bottom line. If you're arrested, ask for a lawyer immediately, follow their advice, and exercise your right to remain silent throughout the entire investigation.
So basically, shut the hell up. Now, in Canada, we have a lot less rights than they do in the States. And the fact that you can't have a lawyer present while they're questioning you is absolutely ridiculous. The lawyer is not allowed in the interrogation room. And if you ask for a lawyer, they're allowed to continue questioning you. That's a clear violation of rights if I've ever seen one. But laws are different here.
So a very common question which comes up in criminal law and which clients have asked me before, if the police, I'm under arrest and the police seize my cell phone, do they have the right to examine that cell phone without a search warrant? The short answer to that is no. It's considered your belonging, your possession. There's a privacy interest. And under Section 8 of the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms, it would be an unlawful search and seizure, which would typically be excluded under Section 24(2) in court on an application. So the police are usually a little bit smarter than that, and they don't search it. I have seen some inexperienced officers do that, and their case gets thrown out for what they found on the phone. They're also not, you don't have to give them their password, and they're not even allowed to have that. So, but you could consent to the search, or they could, I should say. They could say, oh, will you let me search your phone? If you say yes, and they can. So you have to be very careful in that situation, especially if you know that there's some evidence of a crime on the cell phone. So there's your short answer. Typically, the police do not have that right in Canada. And the only way they can get that right is if you give it to them with your consent, which is not necessarily a wise thing to do.
So basically, don't give them passwords. Even if they have a warrant for your phone, don't give them your password. They'll have to figure out how to get in it.
Welcome back to our YouTube channel. Thank you for joining me today. I have an interesting question for you today. Is a pocket knife considered to be a concealed weapon? Very good question, which a lot of people have asked me over the years. Well, first of all, It's illegal to carry a concealed weapon under Section 90 of the Canadian Criminal Code unless you have a lawful purpose from it. So, what is the definition of a weapon, first of all? Because that's important. So, a weapon is anything that's intended or designed to cause death or bodily harm or threaten or intimidate someone. Now, let's think about it. People carry pocket knives for all sorts of reasons. I mean, it could be for work reasons, it could be for hunting, it could be for everyday use in the home. Many people carry pocket knives. Well, that's the key, is the intent. If you're carrying it for a work purpose, for an everyday purpose, that's okay. A pocket knife is not a weapon. But if your intent changes to, look, I carry this for self-defense, I'm going to carry it to threaten or hurt someone, that's the key. So, for example, if the police came up to you and searched you on the street for some valid reason and found a pocket knife, and you said to them, you admitted to them, well, I carry this for self-defense, well, you might get charged with a concealed weapon. If you said to them, for example, oh, I just came from work and I used this to cut the fish at work, much different issue. So it all goes back to the intent of what you're carrying a pocket knife for. A lot of us carry pocket knives for all sorts of reasons, but your ultimate intent, it was clearly if it's for self-defense or you're going to use it or threaten to use it, that's not a good purpose. And purposes can change. For example, let's say you have a pocket knife and you're in a bar and then you get in a fight and you pull out that pocket knife to defend yourself. Well, you may possibly get charged with carrying a concealed weapon and whatever other charges there are. So it all goes back to the intended uses. But if a pocket knife is being used for what it's normally to be used for, that's legal purposes, then that is not a concealed weapon per se, if I might put it that way.
Now, this law is ridiculous, but basically, if you get caught with a knife, you have it for work. I usually say I get a lot of packages, so I have a knife to open my packages. Doesn't matter what you say, as long as you don't say that it's for defending yourself, because in Canada, you're hardly allowed to defend yourself in Canada. So just find a legitimate reason and stick with it. And this guy has a lot of good videos about DUI. So if you're in Ontario or even other provinces, you can go watch his videos about it. Very informative. Uh, but I didn't add them here because in Alberta, you don't have rights when it comes to drunk driving, anything like that. In Alberta, for any reason at all, they can bring out a breathalyzer. They do not need reasonable suspicion. They do not need to see you slur your words or drive erratically or anything. They stop you for any reason at all, they'll come out with a breathalyzer. And in Alberta, if someone calls that they saw you swerving while driving, they could come up to your home and administer a breathalyzer up to 2 hours after you arrived home. So if you get home after work and you have a few beers before the hockey game, and the cop comes to your door with a breathalyzer, you have to blow. If you don't blow in your house, then you will suffer the same consequences as if you were drinking on the road. And if you did have beers after work and you blow past the legal limit, you have to prove to a judge that you had your alcohol when you got home. So basically, when it comes to drunk driving in Canada, you are guilty, or in Alberta, sorry, you are guilty until you can prove yourself innocent. Now, when it comes to ID laws, a lot of difference between Canada and the States. In Canada, if you're driving, you don't have rights. They could stop you just to make sure you have a license. Um, so you don't have any rights. You have to give them your license. You have to tell them who you are. When it comes to you on the side of the road, walking, whatever, in the US, you hear a lot about reasonable articulable suspicion or PC, probable cause. In Canada, it's what's called reasonable grounds. They have to have reasonable grounds to ask for your ID, or they could ask for your ID, but they need reasonable ground to force you to ID. And that's where you can stand and refuse ID. A little shakier than the States. You have to be very careful because they will try to trick you. But there's a lot of reasonable grounds is easier to prove than reasonable articulable suspicion. Well, I hope this helped a little. Just make sure to know your rights in Canada. Learn the Charter of Rights, very important. And if you're doing audits out there or anything, make sure you know your rights or you have a copy of the Charter of Rights with you because you know the cops either don't know it or pretend they don't. So please like, share, and subscribe this video. Let me know in the comments if you like this. And check me out on Patreon, where for $1 a month you can get my videos a week in advance with other perks coming. Thank you.